And here we go. We are off. Hi, everyone. Hi, gang. Welcome. It is second open OTA recap time with Chris Perkins from the South Florida Sun Sentinel, dude who I saw just a couple of hours ago. Perk, how have you been since we last saw each other?
You said it's recap time. I'm thinking it's no cap time. Where's the Expos at?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, come on.
Oh,
now you're recapping.
Oh, that's funny.
There you go.
Oh, you're going to make some people unhappy because some people don't like the hat. Oh, well. Sucks to be them.
Hey, somebody just told me that it's never mind. It's the Randy Johnson. Seattle's getting his number retired in Seattle. Randy Johnson. Anyway, I digress. Yeah.
Former Expo.
I know. Yes, it's Seattle that's doing it, not Montreal. So yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
I know. And a little baseball note for those not aware: Randy Johnson was a good prospect in the Montreal Expos organization way back in 1989. And actually, first year I started covering the Dolphins on a full-time basis, and then the Expos who had at least pennant aspirations traded him along with two other young pitchers, Gene Harris and Brian Holman, to the Mariners for Mark Langston, who was a very, very good lefty starter, except that he barely had touched ground in Montreal, where he had said, I'm not re-signing with this team at the end of the season. And it was like, oh boy, big gamble. Langston was very good for the Expos. They didn't win the pennant. He signed with California afterwards, and Randy Johnson became Randy Johnson. As a prospect, he was 6'10", threw BBs, but was all over the place, which actually made him effective because he was kind of scary for hitters. And then when he harnessed what he had, he became a Hall of Fame pitcher. Anyway, enough baseball talk. See, I know my baseball, and I do know my hockey, even though I kind of like had a little brain fart when I was asking Jaylen Waddle today about him becoming a major hockey fan, going to a lot of Panther games. We see him all the time. And my question to him was, as I phrased it, as the Panthers are headed for their second consecutive Stanley Cup final appearance,
right?
Where in my head I'm thinking they're going for a second straight Stanley Cup title anyway. And of course, I was immediately, everybody else in the media room was like, third.
The very hockey-centric South Florida media, right?
I know. I might be the only one in that media room who's covered more than, let's say, 10 Panther games.
Right,
and
exactly.
I tell Jaylen Waddle after he was done, by the way, I do know my hockey. I just had a break.
You did. Waddle was really good today. He told us he learned how to juggle in 2 days. He told us that like 4 or 5 times. He was very proud of it.
Very proud of it.
I don't blame him. That's a good accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm curious, though, if he ever did the thing. I don't know if we saw it. Well, by the way, gang, we'll get to the OTA observation. We just engaging in our usual pre-analysis foolishness. Yeah. He was talking about this is a new drill that they're doing with new wide receivers coach Robert Prince, and obviously it helps with the hand-eye coordination. I don't know if they've ever done anything similar to what the rookies did at the NFL Rookie Premiere, where I don't know if you saw this. There are a bunch of, I don't know what you call them, long sausage, like plastic sausages, I guess what they are, hanging from a platform, and they fall one at a time. You don't know which one's falling, and you basically have to catch them, all of them. And some of the Quinn Ewers actually did it. It was in the video that I saw, and I seem to recall actually he did very well in that drill. And Travis Hunter, who's got brilliant hand-eye coordination, actually did very poorly at those. So Anyway, enough for that foolishness. We'll discuss maybe a little bit later on, if we have time, what the Dolphins, who spoke to the media after practice, had to say. That was Jaylen Waddle, Austin Jackson, Tyrell Dotson. Help me out here, Park.
Patrick Paul.
God, man, that guy's huge.
And Jaylen Wright.
Okay. And speaking of huge, he's huge in a different way. But Patrick Paul's my Lord. And Jaylen Wright. Go ahead, Perk. What do you look at?
Patrick Paul is a big man. Patrick Paul is a very big man. Always upbeat. It was good to hear from the offensive tackles today, because there is a little bit of question there of Patrick Paul. Number one, is he ready? And Austin Jackson, number two, can he maintain his pre-injury performance? Which, I think he was playing pretty well, although I think he said today that he wasn't. but I thought he was doing okay. But anyway, it was good to hear from the offensive tackles today because it was a little bit reassuring. Patrick Paul, always upbeat. I say always in the year that we've known him.
Correct.
Kid's always got a smile on his face, always in a good mood. The one exception was last year after he started playing his first start. I remember going up to him in the locker room and saying, "How did you do?" And he was like, it wasn't too good. And I was like, wow, the coaches must have really lit into him because he's always upbeat. But it was good to hear from him today. He sounds very self-assured. We'll see what happens out there when they put on the pads. But from hearing from Patrick Paul and from what I've seen, I've got some confidence that he can be that he can start next year and get a letter, or this year and get a letter grade of, I would say, C+. I don't know if he'll get a letter grade of a B, but right now I would say he could get a C+. And Austin Jackson, I would say, could get a C+ right now. So the offensive tackles, you're not going to have a Teron Armstead, but you're very skeptical here. But I think they can both, at this point, be C+ players.
That's you're not exactly raising expectations very much, Perk. I mean, holy moly, if that's the ceiling we're shooting for, I'd like to think they could be B players. Whether that's realistic.
That's not the ceiling. I think right now that's what they could be if the season started tomorrow. I think that's what they could be. We still obviously have a whole training camp and mini camp, but I don't think they're going to be disasters, either one of them. I'll put it. The floor is not disastrous. I would say the floor for both of them might be a C. Maybe a D+, but probably a C. I think they're going to be okay. Neither of them will make a Pro Bowl, but neither of them is going to be a disaster.
Okay, for me, I'll wait until pads come on a little bit. But based on what we know so far, yeah, my expectations are modest. Let's put it that way. I will leave it at that. Okay, so today was OTA number 5 for the Dolphins. They had 3 last weekend. This is with the second one.
Today, that's right. Today was 5. You're right. Today was 5.
How dare you? Right. Sorry. So OTA number 5 was a second OTA that's open to the media, which is why when you read content or see clips, this is not the totality of what the Dolphins have been doing in terms of practice. These are only the practices that are open to us fine folks from the media. Let's get the attendance out of the way. It was the same as last week, second verse, same as the first, which was no Jonnu Smith, no Jaylen Ramsey, no Zach Sealer, and no James Daniels. With Jaylen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, there have been trade discussions. Jaylen Ramsey's situation has been well documented. Jonnu Smith wants a new deal. We can get into Jonnu Smith a little bit later. Zach Sealer also is a guy whose contract status screams to be addressed from the agent standpoint. And I'm going to guess, in a very educated guess, that his absence is contract related. But then again, these are voluntary sessions, so technically you don't have to be there. And James Daniels is recovering from the torn Achilles he sustained while with the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. So his absence obviously makes sense. Everybody else was there. Taj Washington, again, was wearing the red jersey, indicative of a player dealing with some sort of injury. And Chop Robinson had the orange jersey as the player of practice for Monday. And I guess that's a good place to start in terms of practice observation. Again, to me, he was massively noticeable, just as he was last week.
He was. Chop has been very, very active, I would say. Hard to ignore in the 2 practices that we've seen against the run and the pass. I'll say that he's made a couple of nice run stuffs that, again, as you all know, it's only shorts, jerseys, and helmets. No shoulder pads, no thigh pads. Whoever wears thigh pads nowadays. So no pads. But I think that Chop Robinson has been very encouraging. I think that Bradley Chubb has been very encouraging. It seemed like Chubb and Phillips were more limited today than they were last week. Definitely in 11 on 11s for both of them. They were more limited, but we did see them doing individual drills. Two other notes about players coming back from injuries. Tyreek Hill was out there working on the side again, but with no brace or wrap on the right, wrist or thumb. And then Austin Jackson is out there working without a knee brace or a knee sleeve. I think it was his right knee that was replaced, surgically repaired. But anyway, I did ask him about that, and he said he's always hated knee braces, even back in college.
Yep.
And he said he doesn't like to wear them, but I take it as an encouraging sign that he's not wearing any type of supportive device.
Correct. But I want to maybe take issue with something you just said, because as I recall, you can correct me if I'm wrong. My memory maybe at times isn't what it was, considering I couldn't remember the Panthers were going to their third straight Stanley Cup final. I seem to recall him saying on locker cleanout day last year that it was cleanup and not necessarily a repair, which is not quite the same thing. It wasn't reconstructive so much as it was a repair. Maybe I'm getting caught into semantics here, but I think it was one of those where I don't know that the injury was quite as severe. It did require surgery, so honestly it was severe enough, but I don't know that it was what you would call a catastrophic knee injury. And I guess the timeline would kind of follow that along. I could be completely off.
No, you're correct. You're 100% correct on that.
Okay. I'm going to get to the good part right here. Especially since I wasn't necessarily very kind to him last week, because he really, really looked bad last week. But damn, did Zach Wilson look good today. And again, the same caveat I put on last week is going to apply here. It's June now. It's an OTA session. In the grand scheme of things, we shouldn't overdo it. But if I'm going to say he looked really bad last week, I'm going to say he looked really damn good today. He had back-to-back throws, and these weren't the first two good throws he had, but he had a back-to-back throw deal. That was like, damn. One of them was like an absolute pill to the sideline. I don't remember the wide receiver. Maybe Tariq Black, I believe it was. But, I mean, that ball came out of his hand. I mean, it got some zip in there. And on the very next throw, it's to the other side, closest to us, over a defender, very, very tight window to Tanner Connor, makes a catch, and then the offense went nuts on that one. It was a nice catch because he had to make an adjustment or to go down for it. But I was like precision, and you had like a combination of arm strength and then touch on back-to-back throws. So it certainly was a lot more encouraging than it was last week.
Yeah, and you know what, Proof? One thing that I'm watching with Zach Wilson is, new team, new head coach in Mike McDaniel, new senior game pass coordinator in Bobby Slowick, new offensive coordinator in Frank Smith. This is all for Zach Wilson, obviously. Yeah. New quarterbacks coach with Darrell Bevel. That's a lot of voices in your ear. And so it seems like Zach has been able to understand and process the information and take the teaching. We saw them out there earlier today during practice, and the quarterbacks are working on footwork, and you could see Darrell Bevel and Bobby Slowick there just looming. And so, this could be and you got three new quarterbacks out there. Two is the returnee, but you got Zach Wilson, Quinn Ewers, and Brett Gabbert. And it seems like Zach Wilson has adapted very well to these new voices, this new system. He doesn't look confused out there. He did have some stumbling points last OTA, some throws that it looked like he wasn't sure, but it looks like he's cleaned that up to a certain extent. So that's a very good thing to see from Zach Wilson again. He needs to be ready day one. Tua has suffered September injuries in 3 of the last 4 seasons. So Zach Wilson needs to be ready day one. It's a small track, but he has progressed.
Well, from one practice to another was massive. And obviously, when you play quarterback, it's all about consistency, because everybody can make every throw at one time. And you made a good point that it wasn't just the fact that he made 2 wow throws. It was the fact that the ball was coming quicker. He was making his decisions a lot more sharply than he did last week, when he looked like he was confused. Then that was encouraging. And so hats off to him. It was very, very, very impressive. And the other quarterbacks, it was raining the whole practice. It was mostly light. Toward the end of practice, it started coming down a little bit more. And because there's this narrative that Tua has promised throwing in the rain, I will say he threw the ball very well. The offense with him in the last 11-on-11 session bogged down. It was a whole lot of checkdowns there. No, I don't think it was because it was raining and he didn't want to throw it down the field. because I know it's coming from some people. But again, he threw the ball very accurately, and I think it's pretty safe to say that, generally speaking, nowadays, Tua is going to look good in most, if not all, practice sessions because of the nature of practices where he knows he's not going to get hit. And if he knows he's not going to get hit, the dude's very accurate.
Yeah, and Tua, let's look at this from his standpoint also now. There's no Tyreek, there's no Jonnu. So basically, the guys that you worked with last year, there's Jaylen Waddle, and then there's Devon Achane. And pretty much that's it. He didn't work with Malik Washington a whole lot or Eric Ezukama. So the guys that he's throwing to are kind of new targets. He didn't rely on Jaylen Waddle so much today. I don't think Waddle ran as many plays today as he did in the OTA we saw last time.
Correct.
So, and Jaylen Waddle talked about the cornerbacks are doing a great job. I kind of rolled my eyes. I trust Jaylen Waddle.
What else is he? Perk, let me jump in here again. This is why teammate comments mean nothing, because they're all going to say everybody looks good, everybody's making progress. Wow, that group is going to be really good. They're going to surprise a lot of people. What else are they going to say? I'm sorry, Perk, go ahead.
Well, I think that a lot of times you see guys who say, well, that's not necessarily the case. Or look, I mean, Austin Jackson just told us today he wasn't playing well when he got injured.
But he's talking about himself. Ask Austin Jackson about any teammate, and that teammate's kicking ass. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think so. We don't hear glowing reviews for everybody, but I will say this, that Jaylen exaggerated on behalf of his cornerback teammates. I didn't think they looked very good today, and that's going against a second-class group of wide receivers. I didn't. I don't think you're going to have a bona fide number one cornerback this year, even if it's Asante Samuel Jr. or Rasul Douglas or Stephon Gilmore. I don't think any of those guys are up to legit number one status. They would have it forced upon them. But as far as a guy who, look at who the Dolphins have had in the past. I mean, they're not going to have a Jaylen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, Byron Jones.
No.
Right. So yeah, it's, it's not going to be. Yeah. So what I saw from the corners, not very impressive. But if we're going to go back to the offense, Tua threw a good wet ball today. I thought it was good that the Dolphins stayed outside. I didn't think this was a toughness culture change. We're going to be out. I thought that this was, you got 2 September home games. Either of them could be played in wet conditions. You can't avoid the rain totally in South Florida. There was no lightning today, so they could stay outside. So I thought it was productive that they were outside.
I've already forgotten the schedule. And I'm actually normally like.
Is it New England and the Jets?
Oh, New England. There you go. Oh, yeah. Correct. And then Jets are at 9. New England's this is no. Usually, I know this schedule, like I'm losing my touch here. Yep. I do want to say something about the cornerbacks, but let's wrap up with the quarterbacks first. Brett Gabbert didn't get any reps. Whoops, not supposed to say that. No, I think I'm allowed to say it.
That was off the record.
We have certain reporting rules, which I have to say don't apply to every team, but we have to abide by what the Dolphins are asking us to do, which is why sometimes we have to talk around the topic without getting into specifics. The other quarterback, Quinn Ewers, throws a lovely deep ball to the second level or over the top, but he wasn't connecting on any of those today. He had one connection out of maybe 5 or 6 attempts, which is not ideal. That could be how much of it is on Ewers being off the target, how much it is the receiver not being where he's supposed to be. I don't know, but it wasn't necessarily overall. Tua looked good, threw the ball well. Zach Wilson was a stud. That was what I was saying. Cornerback, here's what I would say. Without revealing too many details, we're now at 2 OTAs. I would probably not, at this time, I would not raise expectations or have major high hopes for Cam Smith based on what we've seen in the 2 OTAs. And again, without providing details, I guess you're going to have to take my word for that one. Perk, you disagree with my assessment?
Oh no, Cam. He had. I think he only had one bad play today where he bid on a double move, but he didn't stand out. He doesn't stand out. He doesn't have enough good plays. I wouldn't say that Cam Smith strings together bad plays and always gets beaten. He just doesn't stand out. He doesn't show you that he can hold down a starting job over a 17-game stretch. And I haven't seen that from any of these corners. Storm Duck, Ethan Bonner, Isaiah Johnson, Jason Maitre is on the injured list. Who is the player they signed from the workout rookie minicamp?
Sounds like 2 words. Kendall Sheffield.
There you go. Yeah, none of them, they show me that, if they have to start for a game or two, maybe they could hold it down. But full-time starter, none of them. I don't think any of them could hold that title right now.
See, for me, I would say the guys who stood out a little bit, not that any of them are like, this is my job.
Right.
Kendall Sheffield shown me some things, and Isaiah Johnson, the kid. I liked him last summer. I like him.
Me too.
Still. He's long, and he moves well. But again, I guess it is what it is. And again, in Cam Smith, it's not just that he got beat on a lot of plays. It's how he's used, body language, all that stuff. It's just, again, I really, really wish were more optimistic about him being able to make an impact. Channing Tindall had a great play, by the way. He's another one in the same vein as Cam Smith, a high draft pick who has yet to really make an impact. He had one play where he completely busted up a running play up the middle, which was very good. Since I know Dolphin fans would be interested, I didn't notice Jonas Savaiinaia. And again, this is the format in an OTA is really difficult for offensive linemen to stand out. So I can't tell you, wow, he looks good and everything like that. Kenneth Grant on the defensive line, same deal. There was some 11-on-11 work. The guys I know who made plays or were active. I know Matthew Butler, the lineman the Dolphins claimed off waivers from the Raiders, had one nice play. Who was it? Zeke Biggers one time just blew up the guy who was trying to block him to meet the running back. And Jalen Wright, the aforementioned, really had a couple of nice runs where he just shot through the middle. Ollie Gordon had a nice run where he just made a very quick cut in the backfield. That was really impressive. But to me today was clearly Zach Wilson being the standout.
I noticed, I put a note in the Sun Sentinel, sunsentinel.com, today's practice report about Kenneth Grant. Nice. How about that? Just slid it right in there. I did notice one play where I'm just going to say it. Aaron Brewer and Keon Smith were double teaming Kenneth Grant, and Kenneth Grant did pretty well against both of those guys. There was a play with Jonnu Savaiinaia, Hawaii. Savaiinaia. I did notice him on a couple of plays moving, but really the thing, Poop, that stands out about him is, and I put it in there today, is I think they list him at, I want to say 6'5", 336. And when he stands next to like Liam Eichenberg, who I have to look at their numbers, I think Liam is listed at like 6'5", 310, or if he stands next to Austin Jackson at like 6'5", 320, Jonah looks smaller. He should be the same size, but he doesn't look as tall, and he looks thick. He looks thick because both Austin and Liam are both fairly slim. But Jonah, he doesn't look as big as he's listed. Now, that's not a big deal. He moves pretty well. But it's just, on draft night, it was like, wow, this guy is a mountain of a man, and he's big, but he just looks normal offensive line big, for what it's worth.
No, I agree with you. Trying to think here, if anything else.
Grayson Murphy. Murphy with 3 sacks. He back-to-back plays. He had sacks.
By the way, this is a part where I point out. Sorry, Perk. I don't mean to throw you under the bus. When obviously defensive players stop when they get to the quarterback because you don't want to tackle the quarterback. And then we have to decide whether it would have been a sack in a regular game. And Perk is the Oprah of sack givers among the Dolphin media members, where Perk is like, you get a sack, you get a sack, you get a sack. Sorry, go ahead. So,
the funny thing is, you guys are harder on the offensive line than I am. Because I'm always like, the offensive line really wasn't that bad. Are you crazy, Perk? They suck. So it's a very fine line that we walk here, but or actually a very jagged line, I guess, a very crooked line, a broken line. But yeah, I do think that overall this is going to be an offensive line where we look at them and it's going to kind of be like, they have some proving to do, but I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to be okay, and I think Jonah is going to be okay. We'll see what happens with these guys because again, they aren't in pads right now. But look, you return some experienced guys except for Jonah and Patrick Paul. I mean, the other three guys are James Daniels, Aaron Brewer, and Austin Jackson are fairly experienced. So I think this offensive line should do a decent job this season.
Okay, and going back to your original point, I noticed Grayson Murphy as well, and I noticed him last year before he wound up on IR with an injury. I think it was a knee that he sustained in a preseason game. And I'm here to tell you, it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if he wound up being ahead of last year's rookie 5th-round pick, Mohamed Kamara, on the depth chart when all's said and done. There's something there. I'm not noticing Kamara. I think he may have been dealing with something today. He was kind of in and out. Okay. Unless you have anything else you feel you want to mention about the OTA from my end, I think we pretty much covered it.
That's pretty much it.
Okay, the Jonnu Smith, the latest on that is Adam Schefter reporting that the Steelers now are not expected to trade for him. And I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. To me, it's clearly more than 50-50. He's on the Dolphin roster in 2025. This is all about, I want a new contract. The Dolphins are like, okay, maybe we'll talk about it. And I'm going to guess this has been going on not just recently, and they haven't come to an agreement on what that number should look like. And then maybe this is me spitballing, maybe at some point in the Dolphins, because again, this is me talking from experience. At some point, the Dolphins would go, yeah, you're asking for way more than we want. If we want, we can call around and see. Possibly of moving you. Then Drew Rosenhaus goes on his weekly spot on WSVN on Sunday night, and he does a fabulous job of painting the picture. Jonnu Smith, best season ever for Miami Dolphins tight end, loves Miami, wants to stay in Miami. Hopefully we can work it out. And, the Dolphins are not going to play that game. They're not going to go publicly like saying we'd love to have. Although I asked Mike McDaniel about his level of optimism, confidence that Johnny would be on the roster in 2025, and basically he'd love to have him and all that. But the Dolphins are not going to say we'd love to have him, but there's only a certain amount of financial commitment we're going to make to a guy who's 30 years old who has some limitations as a tight end, let's be honest, who also benefits from a scheme that's favorable. If you have pass catching talent as a tight end, this is the place to be.
It is. And, I wrote about Jonnu today. I'm on Jonnu's side. I think he should get a raise. I think that what Jonnu and
are you Omar? Perk, are you Omar? What have you done with Perk? Sorry, because Omar always takes the player's position. That's
I don't always say, look, I don't think Tua should have got his extension, but
good.
We've talked about that before.
Welcome back, Perk.
Right, exactly. And you can put Jaylen Ramsey on that list too. But anyway, we digress. Yes. Here's what I think is brilliant about what Jonnu Smith and Drew Rosenhaus have done is they've put themselves at the head of the line, because at the end of this season, the Dolphins have to decide on Jalen Phillips, who is playing on a 5th-year option. Devon Achane, are you going to get ahead of it on him? And Zach Sealer, are you going to get ahead of it on him? And I think that Drew, who also represents Zach Sealer, speaking for Jonnu, has kind of said, maybe we should go public with this and try to get the public on your side, because if we wait You aren't getting you're going to be 30. You aren't getting an extension over Zach Sealer or Devon Achane or Jalen Phillips if Jalen Phillips has a good season. So you need to get your message out here now before the season. The other thing here, Jonnu, yes, he is the best number 3 receiving option they've had under Mike McDaniel, right? You've had a number 3 offensive option, if you consider Tyreek 1 and then maybe Achane 2 and Waddle 3, or Mostert was 2 and Waddle was whatever. This is a receiving option. He's better than OBJ. I'm talking about Jonnu here. He's better than Durham Smythe, right? He's better than any other number 3 receiving option they've had. This is a perfect time for Jonnu to assert himself. You're 30 years old. This is the last multi-year contract you're going to get. This is perfect time. You had a good year in Atlanta, a good year in Miami. This is the time for you to strike. I think it's absolutely brilliant strategy. Put the pressure on the Dolphins publicly.
Well, without question, that's what it was. There's a little bit of a PR campaign. The public pressure is on the Dolphins to get something done because the fans are not happy about this. Here we go, damn, stupid Dolphin fans and stupid Dolphins again, I should say. Here's my thing: is I'm not pro player, I'm not pro team. I'm kind of like in the middle. It's where like Jonnu absolutely outperformed his contract last year by a lot, and I have zero issue with him looking for more. The question and what we don't know is what is he asking and is it unreasonable? And it's not one of those. It's never as simple. The Dolphins need to pay him, do whatever it takes to get him under contract. They had, within reason. And again, we don't know exactly what the ask is, and we don't know what the Dolphins are offering. If the Dolphins are playing hardball and saying you're under, I would be shocked if that were the case. You have a contract, you have to play under it. Then I think I'd be on the side of Jonnu. If he comes in and the ask is a bit unreasonable or too high, this creates the impasse where we are right now. But I think ultimately, and this is part, it's a negotiation. It's all part of it. And this was Drew kind of like pressing down a little bit. Right. I still would tend to believe that at some point the sides are going to come together. Neither of them is going to be entirely happy. Neither of them is going to, but both of them are going to be satisfied enough to where they made it work.
And I think, probably if I'm the Dolphins, I probably offer Jonnu a 2-year deal with the first year, this year being affordable and next year being one of those inflated, $14 million a year, and he never sees it. And if he has a good year this year, then we'll revisit the contract and we can turn that 14 into something else. I can't see the Dolphins giving a 30-year-old Jonnu Smith a 3-year deal, even if it's actually just 2 years, because you just can't give a 30-year-old this 30-year-old, Tyreek or Jaylen Ramsey, okay, but you can't do that with Jonnu. And really, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Zach Sealer, because Zach doesn't have a long track record of performing, and he's going to be 30. I know, Poop, but I'm just
man. Sorry,
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I don't know that Zach Sealer is going to break the bank with. He turns 30 this year, and so how much do you want to pay a 32-year-old Zach Sealer who, with no Wilkins and no Calais Campbell by his side? Now you got Kenneth Grant. I don't know, but. The bottom line is that Jonnu is smart to get out ahead of all this stuff, because, again, you're looking at Jalen Phillips, Devon Achane, and Zach Sealer at the end of this season, and you aren't getting paid ahead of any of those three if they perform this season.
Okay, and my point would be if they overreach for any of those, it better be Zach Sealer and not Jonnu Smith, and has got nothing to do with the guy or the player. The fact that Zach Sealer has performed well for the Dolphins longer, and I think he's more important to the success of the team. I could see very well, not necessarily with the same numbers, but the same kind of structure to what the Dolphins did with Raheem Mostert after that monster 2023 year he had, where they basically gave him an extension, which included a signing bonus, job well done. You're getting new money right now, but it gave the Dolphins an easy out this offseason if he didn't match or the Dolphins felt they could move on without him. I could see that exact same structure with Jonnu, and I would have no problem with that.
It's going to be very interesting, just considering they gave out all those extensions in 2024. And you know, you're paying for that. And if you're Steve Ross, is there another big extension out there? I mean, maybe HN, maybe Jalen Phillips, but you know, I don't know if they're going to, you know, I don't know if they're in the mood, considering the tenuous situation of Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel, to give out very many multi-year, 3-4 year extensions. And so that's going to be a factor. And poor Jonnu, you're caught up in that. You know, if you're HN and you're younger, you've got a brighter outlook than, let's just say, Jonnu.
Fair. No, correct. The chance like 25 or 24, right. Without question. But I could see if any, I don't know exactly how long it would be, but maybe Sealer gets like a 3-year deal or something.
Right.
Jonnu, like I said, I could see something like Raheem Mostert. Yeah. Now we're on June 3rd, and as we're taping this, Jaylen Ramsey is still with the Dolphins. Yep. As I think I said before, it wasn't as complicated as June 1st arrives. Then immediately the move's going to be made because the salary cap ramifications are now different. This issue is going to still to me is going to be about talking to teams. What are you willing to give us? And the other team going, oh yeah, how much of the salary you're willing to take on? And that's going to create at this point. Is there a hurry to do anything right now if the Dolphins don't get anything done by the veteran minicamp next week? It's not like Jaylen Ramsey's not around, so it's not like there's I think a situation the Dolphins would like to have settled sooner rather than later, but in the grand scheme of things, does it really make a difference if it happens now, if it happens July 23rd or something?
No. And the Dolphins are in such a bad position because Jaylen Ramsey doesn't want to be there and he's owed money. So they're at a deficit with Jaylen. And then the rest of the league is like, dude, you guys are desperate sellers. We'll just walk away and leave you at Jaylen. So they're at a deficit with the rest of the league also. They're in a hole here. And they've got to figure out, you know, how much of Jaylen's salary do we want to pay to facilitate this deal? What are we going to ask in return? And, you know, how soon can we make a move to get somebody to replace Jaylen Ramsey? You need a little bit of money freed up so you can get somebody. If you're talking Rasul Douglas, Asante Samuel Jr., Stephon Gilmore, Jair Alexander, who, you know, I don't think he's on the table at all. Just throwing out another name there. But so I'm sure the Dolphins would like to get this situation settled, if not for the Jaylen Ramsey aspect, for the turning the page. Do you turn leaves? You turn stones. You turn pages. A new leaf, I guess. Whatever. Forget the leaf.
Turn corners.
Yes, you just turn corners for a fresh start. How about that?
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I think they would like to get Ramsey out and the new person in and just forget about that. So I think for the Dolphins standpoint, you're correct. If it happens June 4th or July 4th or August 4th, who cares? But you just want to get on to the next chapter.
No, I agree. My parting thought here is in terms of the interviews that we heard, Jalen Wright indicating that he's put on 6 pounds since last year, lost fat, gained muscle, and he looks it. What stood out to me was Tyrel Dodson, as I asked him because he was a free agent for one day before he re-signed with the Dolphins, whether he instructed his agent to I want to stay with the Dolphins, make it work. He basically said, I'm a businessman. I told him to look for the best deal possible, which, I mean, I appreciate the honesty, but didn't exactly give me the warm and fuzzies.
No, you know, I would be a little more sensitive to that if we didn't see Tyrel Dodson last year in the Dolphins system actually playing fairly effectively. It's okay that he's back. It's okay that he's back at this salary. I think if this was Cam Smith and you're relying on him, it's a little. Why do I throw Cam Smith under the bus?
Wow, unnecessarily also.
It was. And now I'm about to back the bus up and hit him again. I would be more worried if it was Cam Smith. But it's Tyrel Dodson. He was being honest. I'm fine with having Tyrel Dodson back.
I am. too. But my whole point was this is kind of a reminder to Dolphin fans around the NFL. Is a lot of guys when they resign with their teams, some of them is that they really want to stay there, but for a lot of them is where am I getting the most money?
Right.
Which was, again, it was not surprising, but generally speaking, players don't tend to be that open about it.
Yeah, and especially because I think if you're a player, there's a pride thing also, right? That nobody else wanted me, and if you're a Dolphins fan, you're kind of going, oh boy, nobody else wanted him. But hey, he did start last season and played fairly effectively, so he fits your system. Now we'll see if he's improved.
Correct. That was like, was it Farrell Brown, the tight end the Dolphins got from Seattle? I asked him, like, why did you pick the Dolphins? Well, beggars can't be choosers. And,
right. He did. Those Seattle guys, right? They're brutally honest.
I mean, there must be something there. I mean, other than good coffee, apparently. It's problematic for Okay. That's all I got. Perk, any final thoughts from you?
No, that's it. I've run over Cam Smith a couple of times with my bus. I'm good.
Okay, you have. He is Chris Perkins. Catch his fine work at the South Florida Sun Sentinel, sunsentinel.com. Also host of the Dolphins Deep Dive with Perk. When's the next episode, Perk?
We're on ice right now. Now that it takes personnel. We're short-staffed to put out the podcast. The personnel is occupied with the Florida Panthers. So yeah, we're kind of on ice right now.
Okay, that's okay. You can keep getting my guest over here. So
yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, cool, excellent. Please like, subscribe, share all that good stuff. Catch the written content here at MiamiDolphinsOnSI.com. In not too long from now, 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday Night Live will be the Dolphins Collective with Doug Lee Durong, TD Fins Talk, Omar Kelly, and myself. The All Dolphins podcast will be back. Don't know yet. Check out your notifications. Maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday. In the meantime, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, where the Panthers are participants for the third year in a row against the Edmonton Oilers. Go Panthers. There you go, 3. Thanks, Perk.
All right, thanks, man. I will see you next week or maybe on here before then.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.